lived in a house.
Yeah.
It was a long house, and it had a shop in front.
Right.
And it had quite a spacious yard at the back, huge. And we had all the rooms led one into the other except for the bedrooms. And your mother and Miriam shared the bedroom. And I don't know where I was. Sometimes I was with my parents, sometimes I was with my sisters. Yeah, and we always had family. We always had visitors. Every Saturday we had people for lunch. A whole lot of people. And every Saturday afternoon also we had other people coming. My mother's brother and his wife practically lived at our house.
So
They
what
only
was
went
his
home-
name?
Zamke.
Right.
Solomon he was.
Yeah.
And they practically lived at our house because they only had one child, which was my cousin Mina.
Yeah.
And she was very good friends with my sisters.
Yeah.
They were always together. But things like when I was 2, it was Carnival, which incidentally is this weekend actually. And they dressed me up as a Hungarian and took me to a children's ball. I remember that.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, I remember
I
that.
think there's a
very well.
photograph of you in that costume. In
Probably.
in your family
Probably. I was
scrapbook.
sitting in a little step in front of the
Yes,
house.
and you had like a long skirt on. And
No, that
that's
was your mother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mine had boots.
Yes.
And it had a garland of flowers with ribbons. And it had a black skirt with ribbons around. It was very pretty. I'm sure I've got a picture somewhere, you know.
You should look for it.
Yeah. And I remember about the same age going to the piano teacher and saying to her, please teach me to play. And she did. I couldn't read yet,
Yeah, amazing.
but she taught me the notes. And then a few months later, every year she had an audition of all her pupils. And I was the youngest pupil, and I started the show.
Oh, amazing.
I've still got a picture of that, yeah.
Amazing. And do you remember what you played?
Yes, I played Brahms' Berceuse.
In Sao
We lived
Paulo.
in a totally Italian neighborhood. It was all Italian people around us.
So did you learn some Italian?
Yes, my friends were Italian. I used to go to their house and, they spoke Italian
Yeah.
to each other, and I used to pick it up. And then, of course, when I went to high school, I went to an Italian school.
In the neighborhood?
No, it wasn't in the neighborhood. I had a school bus that used to fetch me every day and bring me back.
And can you remember, like on Saturdays when your mother had people for lunch,
Yes.
what did she used to cook?
Yes, sometimes she used to cook fish. I remember a lot of fish, make a filter fish. And if it was winter, we used to have soup. She used to make the most amazing barley and white bean soup. I've never tasted anything like that.
Really? You don't have the recipe?
I don't, unfortunately, but it was delicious. And what else did she used to make? Trying to think. Oh, she used to make potato latkes and potato kugels and
So was the food
and
more
meat.
from Europe style? of
Yes, yes. And then she learned to cook Brazilian food, and she used to make beans and rice and,
cooking? So who taught her to cook the Brazilian
We
food?
had a neighbor.
Yeah.
She was a lovely lady. She had 2 sons, and they stayed in a house upstairs from us. And she was a lovely lady, and she used to, she taught Mama, she gave her the recipe to make it, but of course they used pork and things like that.
Yeah.
And my mother used to use kosher polony and kosher sausage
Yeah.
and that. And what else? She used to make cloves. you know, which
Minced
is
meat with boiled egg inside.
with the egg inside, yes, cooked in tomatoes, and it was delicious. That I know how to make. And she used to make blintzes, and she used to make all fattening food, of course. Yeah.
She did onion bread, I remember.
Onion bread, and every weekend they used to bake. My aunt used to bake a cheesecake, but like of the dough of babka, you know. She used to make it with cheese that she made herself.
Wow.
She used to make her own cheese, and she used to make that, and my mother used to make the burgers. Every
like
Sunday.
a cinnamon bun.
Yes, and my father's sister used to make like a chiffon cake type of thing that used to be this big always, and she used to say she only uses 3 eggs, and my mother used to laugh because she used to say you need at least 8 eggs for a cake like that.
But she wouldn't give the real recipe.
No. But my mother didn't need the recipe. My mother was such a good baker and
Amazing.
a good cook. And
You have a granny.
I had a granny, yes.
So how long was she alive for?
She must have been about nearly 100 when she died,
Wow.
my father's mother. And we had to go and visit her every Sunday. It was our duty to go and visit our granny. All the grandchildren.
So did you see all your cousins there?
Yes, because two of my aunts,
No, Missy, down.
3 of my aunts stayed.
Yes.
My mother's brother, my father's 2 sisters, they all stayed
One area.
next to each other, in fact.
Right.
And my granny used to stay there as well.
So what was that area called?
Villa Clementino. And my parents had stayed there before I was born.
Right.
Your mother stayed
Yeah.
there, and Miriam stayed there, and they remembered things from
Yeah.
there, but I don't, because when I was born, we'd moved already.
Yeah.
And I was going to tell you something about that.
Your granny? About the
Yes.
cousins?
Yes. No, we used to meet, all the cousins used to meet, and I used to play with them, and it was lovely. That's why we're so close today.
Yeah.
Because we were always together. The families were together. Then we used to go and visit one aunt, and then we had to go and visit the other aunt, and then we had to go and visit the other aunt, and have something to eat at each one, otherwise they would get offended.
What was she like, your granny?
She was very distant. She was a very distant woman. She didn't speak Portuguese. She used to speak Lithuanian, or she used to speak Yiddish.
Right.
Yeah, because she was brought up in a farm in Lithuania. And she spoke the language. And but she never spoke Portuguese, you know.
And she lived in Brazil all those years.
She
but never
lived in
learned.
Brazil but never learned, because the area where they stayed, there were a lot of Jewish people.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, that's what I wanted to tell you. When I went to Brazil last year, Paulo's daughter is staying now in Villa Clementino. And she stays in the street where my parents used to stay.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't believe
Wow,
it.
that's
you know?
amazing, because Sao Paulo is such a big place.
Yes. So I took a walk with Leisha around the suburb, and I wanted to see where the house of my granny and my aunts were, but it isn't there anymore.
Oh, they've demolished
They
it.
chopped it down and built something else, you know. But she always used to give us 2 sweets. Whenever we went to visit her, she gave each grandchild 2 sweets. So my aunt had to go and buy the sweets for her to keep, to give us. Each grandchild got 2 sweets. And she used to, in spite of not speaking the language, she used to catch 2 trams and go and visit us.
Amazing.
She used to come and visit us, and it was a long way.
Amazing.
Yeah, the
That
area.
area.
Yeah, she was born there. And then she told me a story once
Yeah.
because once she fell and she broke her hip
Yeah.
and she was in hospital. And, you know, my parents used to go there every afternoon to sit with her. And one day my father asked me to go and sit with her because he had things to do.
Yeah.
And so he took me there and I sat with her in the afternoon. And she told me this story that when she met my grandfather, she was taken to his house and her mother-in-law gave her a ball of string all tied in knots.
Yeah.
And she had to unravel that
Right.
to see if she had enough patience
Wow.
to, you know, to be married. And
That would be a good test. I should have done that with my 3 daughters-in-law.
yeah, it was a test,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
amazing.
Yeah, she told me that story. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
You know,
Was his name Smollett?
his name was
What was
Smollett.
his first name?
He was Sholem Motel. Yeah, I'm named after him. All the children that were born
After he died.
after he died were all named after him. So I've got another cousin called Sula.
Yeah.
Marcus was named after him, and my cousin Solomon that lives in Israel was named after him, and I was named after him. So there were 4 of us
Amazing.
born straight after he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And when he came to Brazil, did he work?
No, my father supported him.
Can you remember what it was like for them when they heard about the Holocaust?
I was a child.
Yeah.
I was small, but I remember my mother getting a letter
Yeah.
from Uncle Joe from Pretoria because they just had, Shirley was just born,
Yes.
and my mother kept on asking who is she named after and who is she
Yes.
named after, and eventually he wrote a letter to say that she was named after the mother. So
Granny's
that's when
mother. Yes.
that's when she heard that they all perished.
Right.
And then, of course, the stories came out.
Yes.
But I remember my mother sitting Shiva
Wow.
the day she got the letter. I remember that,
Wow.
you know. She and Miriam and your mother, they were all sitting on chairs, and I didn't know what was going on.
I'm sure, yeah.
You know, only afterwards
Yes.
I realized what
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
And my mother adored her mother. I believe she was a very, very lovely person. And Sonia, you know, used to tell me that her granny was a wonderful person. We missed out not knowing
Yes.
her.
So she would have died in her 50s.
Yeah. You know, and she went through a lot, my granny, because she got married and she had, how many children did she have? 6? Because her husband died, he was 33, and she was pregnant with her last child.
6th child.
She lost a child because she had a maid that dropped the child on its head.
Oh, how terrible.
My mother told me that story.
How terrible.
And
So
the
was that a
child
girl or
died.
boy?
A boy.
Before the last one was born? Or
No, long
somewhere-
before. Long before.
So there were 3 girls. And
Yeah, there were 3 girls
3
and
boys.
3 sons, and there was the 7th
So
child
she
that
had 7
died.
pregnancies.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
And so when my grandfather died, he was 33 and she was younger, and she had to just carry on. And then
Yeah.
came the First World War, and they had to run away. They had to leave everything
Yeah.
and run away. And my mother told me that she and her brother, Zamka, they took pillowcases.
Yeah.
And they put pillows and the silver in the pillows, and they took it with them. They were so clever.
And where did they go to?
They went on a cattle train to Russia. And they used to get into the train, and they were locked from the outside.
Wow.
And they didn't know how long they would be in the train, whether it was 2 days or 3 days. And every now and then they used to unlock the train and they used to get out.
So they weren't
and try and
prisoners, they were just
walk.
looking for a passport. They were just looking for a passage, a ride. They were travelling, they weren't prisoners.
They weren't prisoners, they
No.
were refugees.
Refugees,
Yeah. And that is when your grandfather's first wife,
Yes.
that's when she died.
Ah, okay.
Because she was, I think she was pregnant.
She must have given birth.
No, but she must have been pregnant with
Yes.
somebody else.
Yes.
And they went on a horse and cart. They
Yes.
were running away, and
Yeah.
she passed on. She passed away. Eventually arrived in Russia, and they went to a town called Tsaritsyn, which today is called something else.
Yeah.
But it was near the Volga River. And my granny found them accommodation at a place that there was a yeshiva downstairs, and she found apartments upstairs, and she used to make a living. She used to cook for the people of the yeshiva. That's how
Amazing.
they survived.
That's amazing.
Went back to Bizai, and their house was burned down. There was nothing left. She had to restart from the beginning.
Wow.
And opened her bakery again. And
Did she have a bakery before?
yes,
Okay.
she did. Yeah, she did.
Well, I remember Sonia telling us that she made fantastic bagels, and people used to come from far and wide to
Yes.
eat her bagels.
Yeah. Yes, and my auntie Leah, you know, Molly's
Yes.
mother, when I went to Pretoria, the first time with my mother, she made us bagel. She knew the
Really?
recipe.
Oh, that's amazing.
She made us lovely bagel, yeah. My mother had an uncle in Worcester who had immigrated in the 19th century. And he settled in Worcester. And apparently my mother's father went to Worcester to his uncle.
Yeah.
And he thought they were savages and he hated it, and he went back.
Wow. Wow. He could have saved his family.
Absolutely. But that was, I think, before he was married.
Right.
Yeah,
Wow.
so he was very young.
Amazing. What a journey to do and come back and...
Yes, and he went all the
And
way
he
back.
preferred living in
Yeah.
Beerside to living in
Yes.
Worcester.
Yes.
How
You know,
interesting.
my mother's brother that was in Brazil, they went back to Europe. They were already married, and Mina was a little girl,
Yeah.
and they went back to Bizai. And then, for some reason, they didn't stay. I think they could see that things were not,
Yes, not
not
good.
very good. So they came back. It was in the early 30s,
Right.
and so they came back again.
But that would have also been wiped out if that had happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And my father said he always begged the family to come to Brazil. He would have brought
Yes,
them the same he
yes.
brought his family.
You would have brought your mother's family, but they
Yeah,
didn't want
but
to
you
leave.
see, they didn't want to leave because my granny was well off in those
Yes.
days, and her son-in-law, Sanya's father, he had the concession for the fishing in the lake.
Yeah.
So he was well off. And the other brother-in-law, I don't know what he did, but they didn't want to leave.
So Granny had two sisters still
Yes.
in Beerside.
One you
Sonia's-
named after.
yes, so-
Your Sanya's mother,
Sonia's
Hannah,
mother,
you
yeah.
named after
And
her.
then the other sister?
The other sister was named Reiska.
Right.
Yeah, and I think, yeah,
Was she a bit older than Granny?
no, she was the youngest.
Oh,
Hannah
I
was the oldest,
Okay, then Granny.
and then was my mother, and then
And
was...
who did she marry, Reiska?
I don't know. I've still got pictures of her.
But
and
she
her
was also
children.
murdered.
She was murdered, yeah.
Right.
But she was in a concentration camp. She didn't get murdered in Birsa.
Right.
Maybe she was living outside and she landed up in a concentration camp. Yeah. His elder brother and his elder sister wanted to go to Israel, so he sent them to Israel.
From
Only
Brazil.
from Beerside.
From Beerside. Before it was the state of Israel.
Before, long before. And then they came to Brazil. Only afterwards they came to Brazil. My uncle was a great Zionist. He also died, he was 56.
Is that Marcus's
Father.
Right.
Never did a day's work in his life. He was only involved in Jewish affairs. And my poor aunt worked to the bone.
Wow.
She used to do corsets and bras and things like that. And she was well known. She was a very good corsetier, and she was well known, and she worked at home till late at night. She used to make all my bras and my mother's.
So interesting, your mother would not have seen her mother from about 1925 until 1940 when she died, 15 years. I mean, that's unthinkable to us today, isn't it?
Today, yes. Yeah, in those days,
it was
when
hard
you
to
left
travel,
home,
you left forever.
You left forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was no visiting, there was no telephone calls.
No.
There was just letters. Did you write a lot of
Letters,
letters?
yes. Yeah.